there were some slides, but so I've always wanted to be an architect. The story's probably not uncommon. I was fanatical about Lego, drew sections of buildings as a kid, did work experience in architecture in high school. My career has never been sort of linear though. It's sort of been lots of S's. However, between leaving high school and working as an architect, it's taken me about 16 years. So really, really quick bio. I was born and grew up in Sydney, changed high schools 3 times from Golston to Ku-ring-gai, finally ended up at Newington. And during this time, I was absolutely focused on playing ice hockey, which is a bit strange for an Australian, but I played for Australia, which took me to places like I played in Korea and Canada, Russia, Czech Republic, and the US. And then after high school, I left Australia immediately to go play hockey in the States at a school called Colorado College, which was at the time one of the top-ranked hockey schools. So it was a dream come true. It was fantastic. Problem was, in my first year there, I tore my ACL twice, had a major car accident, so it ended up becoming the worst year of my life. So I had to refocus on my studies. I majored at the time, so I thought I'll major in English and then classics, so Latin and classical Greek. Wrote my thesis on the origins of the novel, graduated, and ended up staying in the States. Finally, after all this, I said, okay, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go back to architecture. So I went back to school to study architecture. So in the States, it's a 3-year master's degree for people with an unrelated undergrad, which would have been good, except I decided to come back to Australia after starting and finish off here. Problem with that was you have to start from the beginning, which is another 6 years, with 18-year-olds and looking at doing the degree all over again. So in a sense, my life had been nothing but change. The first thing I want to say about change is that aside from the particulars of my story, I think everyone faces it. It's not uncommon to anyone. And this is because change is inevitable. Rather than fight it, I think there have been five things that have helped me recover from these various traumas and refocus on achieving what I wanted to do. And those are, if we flip to the next slide, desire, tolerance for risk, flexibility, an ability to be opportunistic, and also just a little bit of luck. So firstly, desire. If you were to map it out sort of as a diagram, there's probably, I think, 2 different ones that, for me, I don't know which one's right. It's sort of a mixture of both. Everyone has desires, but acting on them is really scary. So changing high schools 3 times, that was really scary. Leaving Sydney at 15 to play hockey in Russia, that was scary. Leaving at 19 for what I thought was going to be forever, that was even scarier still. But desire was that sort of motive force, which you can use to allow you to move from where you are right now to where you want to be. But in order to act on one's desire, though, you need to have a really high tolerance for risk. As I mentioned, in my first year of college, I tore my ACL. You can imagine the pain, not from the injury itself, but from the immediate realization that the thing that I've worked on and dreamed about for the last since I was 12 years old, was suddenly and irrevocably over. So the effect of this was to make me extremely flexible. You need to be flexible when the circumstances around you change, but also when you don't hit the goals you're aiming for. I mean, and this is really common. I mean, this happens to me all the time. And that difference between where you aimed and where you end up is like the amount of pain you feel. And so if you're not flexible, the pain's even greater. So, okay, so I'm in the States. I can no longer play hockey. I was forced, however, through hockey, and it was definitely not through my HSC results, I found myself at a very good school in the States. So I was forced to become opportunistic. And so you look around, where am I? What resources do I have available? How can I best make use of them? Forget the next one. So this is not like, I'm not talking about opportunism like Machiavelli, but more like the Mars rover, as it uses the gravitational pull of planets to sort of slingshot itself to where it wants to go. So military people talk about the fog of war. So this is the confusion about what happens once the fighting begins, and all of your strategy that you've well-played, sort of formatted strategy goes out the window. And this is not unlike daily life. I mean, you might have a great strategy to achieve your goals, but there are many day-to-day distractions and tactical decisions that you have to make on the fly. So you need to be flexible, you need to be able to take risks, and you need to be opportunistic. So I started architecture in the States, but after moving back to Australia, I had no choice but to spend twice the time on a degree that I already felt really late for. There was no way that I would have willingly chosen to go back to school for another 6 years. But looking back, in hindsight, it was an extremely fortunate decision. And this was just because I was lucky. Architecture architecture is a long game, and it takes a lot of time to find oneself within the profession, I think. Fortunately, the 6 years I spent developing in Australia at architecture school have been of enormous benefit. So last year, finally I was ready to quit my job and start a firm, which I did. And we were out that night to celebrate, and I got a phone call saying, we're having a baby. That's great. I just quit my job. We had the baby 6 weeks ago, and the changes haven't stopped. I don't expect they will, but neither has my desire. But I'm feeling I'm going to need to be a little bit more flexible, even more opportunistic, and I guess still a little bit lucky. So thanks for listening to me.